So we need to have a proper conversation about Kamala Harris and her role as a respectable Negro in politics and popular culture. If you do your research, you'll learn very quickly that she was basically a black person who had a leg up through generational wealth from an economics professor who was Jamaican and an immigrant, and a cancer researcher who was Indian and an immigrant. And she was a part of the second wave of children to be integrated into the Berkeley school system during the 60s or 70s. Because both of her parents went to Berkeley, she was able to get into it more easily. And after that, she went to Howard, and she was able to form a really strong base of wealthy donors in San Francisco and in like the California and like West Coast as a whole, because she was able to get through these doors because she knew how to talk, and she was conventional and light-skinned and had straight hair and said all of the right things and went to fancy parties and soirees with the children, college-age children of these wealthy like millionaires and billionaires who later became her top donors. She was so good at it that later Harvey Weinstein and Donald Trump not only donated to her once but twice in her bids to get her elected to like district attorney like office and different things she wanted to be in California. And then later she became top cop and the district attorney of San Francisco. This is the thing. You can argue that people of color are forced into these roles, meaning that it's like a fixed track that we have to stay on, meaning we're not really allowed to be radical or political or anything, or else like we die. And so sometimes we become the monster. I would argue that while that's an understandable thing, and you need to understand that in order to make heads or tails of the system and what it does to people, we're having a conversation about her having a lot more power over a bunch of people. No, not even a bunch. Over, what was it, like almost 1 billion people in the US, like 500 billion people? And who is an authoritarian personality. If you listen to this clip, like, it just says everything it needs to say about her.
I would not be standing here were it not for the education I received. So I decided I was going to start prosecuting parents for truancy. And I've got a little political capital, and I'm going to spend some of it. As a prosecutor and law enforcement, I have a huge stick. The school district has got a carrot. On my letterhead, now let me tell you something about my letterhead. When you're the DA of a major city in this country, usually the job comes with a badge. And there is often an artistic rendering of said badge on your stationery. So I sent a letter out on my letterhead to every parent in the school district. We sent it out to everyone. A friend of mine actually called me and he said, "Kamala, my wife got the letter." She freaked out. She brought all the kids into the living room, held up the letter, said, "If you don't go to school, Kamala's going to put you and me in jail." Yes, we achieved intended effect.
Okay, so need I say more? And for reference, this is from a 2010 event where she was talking about the truancy bill, or the idea she had to be tougher on truancy in San Francisco when she was the district attorney of San Francisco. It was a huge hit. And if you sort of like research her and go to the Daily Beast and Politico, you'll see like bits of her record, or you can just see the entire thing, where she's just a cop. Like, she's a flat-out cop, and she enjoys it. She likes being able to prosecute people, and she has, like, this very carceral mindset about everything. There are so many, like, parts of interviews that you can hear where you see, like, this sparkle in her eyes when she talks about being able to send people to jail. What the hell? You know? And ultimately, I don't really care if you vote for Biden and Harris. I probably will myself. But that's because we have our backs pinned against a wall with a gun to our heads. We don't have a decision. Like, we don't have a choice. But what I don't tolerate, especially with Kamala's a sore spot for me, is people trying to rewrite her as, quote-unquote, someone who had to do what they had to do. A black woman who had to do what she had to do. And the answer is no. I know that Angela Davis was recently trying to say that we should keep our minds and our hearts open about her, because it's feminist to accept that women make mistakes and sometimes have unsavory histories. I mean, obviously, yes, that's true, but we're not talking about someone that you can get to know, that, you know, you can see if, like, they've changed, if you can help them change. We're not someone, I mean, we're not talking about someone you have a personal relationship with. We're talking about someone in a position of power. And would you say the same about Bush? Would you say the same about Trump in 20 years? Where there's like an editorial piece by the New York Times or by The Guardian where they try to say that he was a man of many flaws and he was misunderstood. Just because she's a woman doesn't absolve her of the fact that she is a cop. Like, she's a self-described cop and an authoritarian to the T. Like I said, she gets a glint in her eyes when she talks about being able to throw people in jail for years and years and years, or just having them die in jail and rot. She doesn't care. It isn't feminist at all, because you're talking about a person that wants to uphold the system by any means necessary at the expense of all of these dead bodies of black and brown and poor people piling up literally in like the back of a state county jail somewhere. I don't want to hear it. And I also have noticed about Angela Davis has been making a lot of, do you call this like concessions recently? Like she's all like bending the knee and saying, oh, well, you know, we need to get like Trump out of office, orange man bad. And yeah, I know Trump is a fascist. Yes, of course I know. But you also can't force people to basically just continue on what they've been doing. People want the system gone. We're tired of making excuses for people and just waiting and settling and all of this stuff. And we're living in the middle of a pandemic where if you literally like go outside, or rather go outside into like an enclosed area, and a bunch of people decide to be assholes and not keep their masks on because of the broader lack of information and just the nature of this country, you're probably going to die, or at least you're at high risk. So it's not really a matter of Kamala not being a perfect person. We're talking about her being in charge of whether or not people live or die, and she's made it abundantly clear for decades that she's very authoritarian and is fine with people dying, and actually looks forward to it. Because she sees things in a very narrow black and white way, and she's being VP to Joe Biden, who already supported the crime bill and tried to take, what's that word I'm looking for? He tried to say that he came up with the idea for take credit. He wanted to take credit for coming up with the idea for the Patriot Act, and it's just what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you talking about? And especially with all of he was anti-desegregation and just like the history of everything that he supported, and just in general, like especially during the Obama administration. I don't know, you can't even argue that it's the lesser of two evils. It's just an evil of a different kind who wants to be nice, and I don't really care about someone who wants to be nice. They're both gonna stab you. Would you rather someone stab you who's smiling, or someone who's stabbing you and is actually being upfront about them thinking you're a piece of shit? Like, that's ultimately all it comes down to. And as far as the role of the respectable Negro goes, there's been a lot of editorial editing about the kind of person she is and her policies, and basically trying to make excuses and saying that she has a problematic past. Let me tell you something. Someone with a problematic past is someone that has maybe said like a slur or like something ignorant, made a dumb mistake, and then apologize, and then later try to put forth the effort to like rectify it to show that they changed and they grew, because, you know, humans make mistakes and they grow. We're not perfect. We've all been racist. We've all been bigots. There is a difference between you doing that in like your personal time and it being like a personal thing, versus you wanting policies that literally indict and punish and kill and jail all of these people, and you're serving the system as a dog. Those are two completely different things. You cannot say that politicians are problematic when you're looking at them having like piles and piles of bodies and like unmarked graves and all these children that, like, they've been fine with dying overseas in the Middle East and all of this stuff, you know, and people dying at home in the prison industrial complex system. You can't, like, this isn't problematic behavior. You're saying that murderers are problematic. You're saying that authoritarians are problematic. It's what they did to George W. Bush, and now they're trying to do it to Kamala Harris, just because she's black. And people want to be like, oh, well, you know, you should treat people of color with soft gloves, and they had to do what they had to do. This is the thing. You do have to sort of use a different framework when you start to talk about people of color in places of power. That is something you have to do. But you have to do that, and then you have to take an exit. You can't stay there, because then you start to make excuses for them. Then it's like, well, you know, I'm fine with sending our people to jail, you know, that's just the nature of my job, and I had to make money to feed my kids, and someone called me like a nigger in 63, 64, 65. I've always had it hard. You can offer understanding and a structural Marxist perspective for where they are, but you cannot make excuses for them. Like, we're people at the end of the fucking day, and if people in power want to maintain their power, then you need to put your boot on their fucking necks and call them what they are. Hello, it's not that difficult. And people are doing that with, like, black people now, because they're trying to rely on people of color to, like, save votes to kick Trump out so we can go back to the way things were before, which are basically everything that's going on now, but it's going to be, like, obfuscated and hidden. So the DNC is basically trying to save its ass, and it's not working, because all these black people don't even want to vote for Kamala. They've seen what she is. The only people who are going to vote for Kamala that are black are from from the K-Hive. And they're, like, delusional, reactionary, like, black, like, liberals who are aspiring PMCs. That's all those people are, and a lot of them are women. Which is just... it's sad. It doesn't matter if a person of color or if a black person is in a place of power. You hold them accountable. You know, I hate the word accountable, but this is the system that we're in. You have to identify if this person ultimately is trying to reform the system so they can get out of it, or if they want to reform the system because it's just like a useful tagline, because being a communist, being an outward and proud communist will, like, get you killed, and people find it easier to just play the game and then just die that way. Because it's rather they die comfortably, or they die with a bullet to their heads and get assassinated like the Black Panthers did. As far as the Respectable Negro goes, it's basically us staying on this very narrow track of what to be, and we're not allowed to be radical, we're not allowed to be revolutionary. And I think after decades of having that pressure on us and that expectation, a lot of us just gave into it. I mean, the Black Panthers were assassinated, MLK was assassinated, whoever was radical was assassinated or had to, like, flee the country and go live in Cuba or somewhere else, or they were thrown in jail. People don't know if they were assassinated or not. It's just, you can't be a revolutionary and black in this country, especially in this time. That's understandable. But you have to be very wary of dogs, of people who know what the stakes are, but they'd rather just serve the master. It's a lot like there being a plantation, and there being house slaves, and there being field slaves, and then the house slaves know what the field slaves are going through, but they'd ultimately, like, they value the house, like, so much. And while you can understand that, if they're a traitor, they're a traitor. Simple, point blank. You know, and if they want to change and defect, then that's great. More power to them, and they should. But the fact of the matter is that a lot of these people, a lot of these black people who are in places of power and are politicians who have played this game for years, they're not going to change. A lot of them were, like, my mother, for example, was born in 58. My dad was born in 57. They don't really know, like, they can't make heads or tails of this political climate that we're in. And they're from a completely different time. And they grew up during all these different eras, during, like, the Reagan administration, which made a lot of black folks very conservative, the Clinton administration, the Bush era and the Obama era. And we just got more and more conservative because we were able to, it became easier for us to be comfortable, to accumulate generational wealth and be able to send our kids to these fancy schools and have them be like black versions of white people. It's what happened to Kamala. You know, it's basically, it's what the American dream is for immigrants. It's your hope that if you work hard enough, you can save and you can, like, your back can lie the foundation for your kid to live a better life. That's ultimately, like, what it is. You know, and now she's VP, so now there's all of these editorial pieces about how she started off as the child of immigrants and how she's like the American dream and ooh, woo. But you have to look at people for what they are. If someone ultimately wants to serve a system as its dog, then that's what they are. Unless they show you otherwise and actually mean it. Meaning that they're upfront about wanting to completely destroy the system. Meaning they're not going to be popular. Meaning they're not going to have billion-dollar donors. Meaning that they're not going to be top cops. Meaning they're not going to be authoritarian. Meaning they're not going to be pro-prison reform and like anti-prison abolition. Or who just enjoy prisons existing in general with that sort of like carceral mentality. It's not people that have glints and sparkles in their eyes when they talk about being able to throw parents in jail, like parents of kids who have like truancy marks. Those aren't these people. These aren't people who are going to want to change at all. They're not going to change in time for anything meaningful. Like they're going to be stuck in their ways. And that's okay to say. And I think it's really hard for a lot of like young people, like millennials and Gen Z and Gen X, younger Gen X, where we have to sort of like look to these boomers and say, fuck you. We're not going to preserve like this rotting and disgusting system that was always meant to be broken. It doesn't mean I hate you. It doesn't mean, you know, there's bad blood or any of this stuff. It's just, we can't do it anymore. And if you're going to stand in my way, then you can die along with it. And we're not going to take whatever you valued into the world we create next. It's as simple as that. A dog is a dog. So to wrap things up, there's a story that I want to tell. It's about someone that I don't know personally. So there's a mixed guy. He's mixed with actually Jamaican and white. He's raised to a white mother that takes it upon herself to start adopting black children from a black adoption agency because, you know, she implicitly wants to do some good in the world, wants to put her whiteness and her privilege to good use, a good Samaritan kind of person. And this dude, he grows up between two worlds. He's half black and he's half white, and he's fairly light-skinned. And he gets to see the world from a different perspective. His siblings, some of them are darker than him, and he experiences a lot of situations where his siblings are targeted for abuse and violence, and this guy, he's usually the one to call when something goes wrong. If there's anything that goes wrong with his siblings, if he needs to take care of something, he's the one that they rely on. He's a pretty good, upstanding guy. He has a good moral compass. He's someone that you would look at, or you would get to know, and you would be like, he has a good head on his shoulders. So as he grows up, he takes a few jobs here or there, and he decides that he wants to join the police. His mother stops him, and she goes, "What are you doing?" And in the back of her mind, she's freaking out because her son, even if he's light-skinned, is still a black man. And she's worried because he wants to join a department of over 900 people, and he would be one of the 80 black cops, or the cops of color that they want, that they're bringing in into the fold because of a new initiative to diversify the ranks a bit. He listens to her, but according to his words, and especially after seeing one of his siblings or one of his cousins get stopped and frisked by the police, he tells her, You know, there's so much wrong going on in the world, and he's been watching the Black Lives Matter protests. You know, why can't someone and why shouldn't someone try to reform the system from the inside? And about a year goes by. He eventually manages to become a rookie within that police department. He becomes a part of the 80 police of color that join that department. When he gets to the level of rookie, he's called in one afternoon, him and his partner, the person he's working with. It's his third day on the job after being promoted to the level of rookie. And they're called in the middle of the day during the afternoon, during spring, for someone that was trying to buy something using a fake $20 bill. They're both called to the scene, and under the guidance of another cop who has a higher ranking than him, the cop forces the man down to his knees, and this cop that I'm talking about, the mixed one, he holds his back down. And he holds his back down while his higher ranking officer decides that he's going to kill him. And he just sits or squats idly by and does nothing. The name of this officer is Alex King, and he was one of the officers that stood idly by during George Floyd's death. So that's so much for wanting to reform the system from the inside. That's where that gets you. So, I mean, that's what you get when you want to elect cops into positions of power.